What's up, people? I'm Shaggy, the opinionated hippie, continuing my deep dive into all the officially released Grateful Dead shows. And today I'm going to talk about Dave's Picks number 55, a show from the European tour of 1990, the second Paris show, 10/28/90, with some amazing bonus tracks slash filler from a show 2 days later, the first of the London shows, 10/30/90. I was at these shows. I flew over there and did the European tour back then, took a semester off from college, went with a bunch of friends, met a bunch of whole new friends. It was an absolutely amazing experience. And for the most part, I haven't listened to any of these shows. I'm not one of those who seeks out shows I've been to. I like to have that moment sort of preserved in my memory. So this is the first time I've revisited either one of these shows or either one of this music. So that was exciting. Both of these experiences were absolutely amazing. The Paris shows were probably the peak of the entire tour. There were a lot of people that came over from the States for the entire 11-show run. The first show was in Sweden. That was the smallest contingent of Americans by far. Then they went to Germany for several shows. But it was Paris, which seemed like everybody made the Paris shows. And then London was after that. But fantastic time. My memory of almost that entire experience is the shows were all pretty solid, but none of them were mind-blowing great, though there were mind-blowing great moments in several of the shows. For me, it was more of just the overall experience than it was the music. But listening to these, I think in some sense, the main release on this, the 10/28 Paris show, kind of confirms that feeling for me. And it really was more about some of the songs they brought back, some of the Bruce Hornsby songs they dropped just because Bruce was on the tour, more than it was the actual, music. Solid performances, but not any of those you're like, you must hear these. Where then we get to the 11:30 show, and that actually, I'm like, okay, this was way better than I remember it. So this was a really interesting experience. But what I'm going to do is, elsewhere on the channel, I was deep diving into the 73 tour and all the official releases, but I'm missing a disc. I was going through the Here Comes Sunshine box, and I'm missing the second disc of the fourth show. It's somewhere in this mess of a house. I have this upcoming week off. I don't go back to school for like 2 weeks, and so I have another little mini vacation, taught a summer school play last week. So I'll be doing a lot of cleaning. Hopefully it'll turn up. But for now, we're going to deep dive into 90. So at the end of this, I'm going to talk about this release. I'm going to rank this release because it's a Vince Welnick era release. I have a list of all Vince Welnick era shows ranked. So I'm going to rank this among the Vince Welnick shows, and then I'm going to rank this among all the 90 shows that I've done. And then we're going to deep dive into some of the absolutely fantastic 90 releases. But let's talk about this. Paris, October 28th, 1990, the second of two shows at an awesome venue called Les Zenith. Probably one of the best times I had in my life. The night before, my roommate from Berkeley who went there with me, we were in no mood to go back to the hostel or get in a cab or do anything. So we walked from Les Zenith back to our youth hostel. Took us hours and hours, walked by one of Jim Morrison's graves, and there were people hanging out, had some crazy adventures. But I was pretty exhausted. I remember being absolutely exhausted on the day of the 28th. After the show, we went to the train station to catch a train to Belgium, to wait for the ferry to get to London the next morning. There were so many people on the train, they just opened up like an empty boxcar and let us sleep in there. So it was packed with deadheads, freezing cold. This is end of October in Europe. But we all had sleeping bags, and it was actually probably one of the coolest experiences ever to just kind of hang out with all these people. But yeah, the music. Let's talk about the music. So the first set is your pretty typical first set with a couple really nice song choices and some really good performances. Opens up with a touch of gray. Then we get a Walkin' Blues that is a really nice Bruce Hornsby piano solo. We get a Candyman. Jerry's got that really watery, heavily affected guitar solo. Good energy in a Candyman. I'm always up for a Candyman. One of those songs that if they played it too much, I think it could be a drag, but they dropped it just a handful of times, it seems, every tour. I think we got 2 in like Europe, so just the perfect amount. Really good. A Box of Rain, always nice in this era. It wasn't as common as it was back in 73. Always good to hear Phil sing. Then we get a Mexicali Blues, in which the sort of Vince Welnick era synth keyboard sounds are a little like, it's almost like he's got this fake violin sound going on, and there's a very carnival-esque kind of sloppy vibe about it that I can't say I really like. During the solo section in the middle, they try to like give Bruce a solo or give Vince a solo, and so it's just, there's a sloppy vibe to the Mexicali that just doesn't quite work. And just the overall, the midiness of it all and the sounds that Vince are using, it's a little like, okay, the 90 does have some sort of like sonic problems as far as some of the sounds they were using. But then we go into a Maggie's Farm, only the second ever since 87. They did 3 in 87, disappeared until earlier this Europe tour. They dropped it in Essen. They drop it again here. So this was the 5th one ever. Pretty awesome. Good to hear. But that violin sound, that sort of fake violin sound that Vince has, I'm not a big fan of. But Jerry sounds great. He's got some good energy in here. Kind of a sloppy ending, like they're really haven't figured out how to end it. But it's nice to hear Maggie's Farm. Then we get an Althea, which is always amazing. The closing jam on this, the solo closing jam is fantastic. Jerry has a little bit of trouble with the lyrics, but nothing too horrible. Jerry would have more trouble with the lyrics later on. I think it's in this show, or maybe it's the next show, the filler stuff. But we got some more lyrical problems coming up later with Jerry. Then we get a fantastic Cassidy, where we jump off into that ending solo jam, which is nice and spacey and exploratory, kind of out there. Not the tightest run through of the song ending changes, but pretty good. But a really good Cassidy for the era. Then we get a Tennessee Jed, where I do think that sort of fiddly sound that's on Vince's keyboards kind of work for Tennessee Jed. The solo, as always, is fantastic. And then we close out the set with one of 3 Stander on the Mountains, a Bruce Hornsby song off his, was it Night on the Town was the name of that album. An okay song, very kind of dramatic. They kind of jam it out a little bit at the end. I like it better now listening to it on this release than I did at the time, just thinking I'd rather hear something else. I like that they're trying to include Bruce. When we were in Amsterdam prior to going to Stockholm for the first show, Bruce Hornsby announced that he was playing the Milkveg, and everybody tried to get tickets because the rumor has it was a secret Dead show at the Milkveg in Amsterdam. It wasn't. It was a straight up Bruce Hornsby song. But he did a number of songs. It was a fantastic show. There was nothing but like really excited Deadheads, it seemed. Probably more than half the crowd. I think everybody who was there went to that show from the States. And there were other songs that I thought he could have dropped here that were a little more party or looser, but they try to jam it out at the end, but it's an okay song. They only did it 3 times. They did it here, the Paris show, they did it in the last London show, and then they did it when they returned to Oakland in early December. I was still in Europe at the time, so I missed that one. But they only did it 3 times. But it's a solid first set. I think it's more about, do you like these songs, whether than there's any single performance. But I do think that run from like Maggie's Farm, Althea, Cassidy is probably the peak of this set. The second set has a fantastic set list, though I don't think any of the, other than the opening song of the second set, I think the performances are pretty standard for the era, but just good songs to hear. We open up with A Victim of the Crime, which just has noises and distortion and darkness, and we have a nice, really peak ending to the jam. And once that jam peaks, it kind of cuts off rather abruptly, and we go into like the segue into the next song, but we kind of linger in that sort of chill, where are we going next vibe for a while. And even though we're definitely moving away from like dark victim energy, every once in a while Jerry or Phil will just drop a do just to remind us that we're there, and like the darkness seeps back in. Excellent Victim of the Crime. There's a Foolish Heart that's in the special material that fleshes it out, the bonus material. Excellent Foolish Heart. They're figuring out these songs by this time. The Victim has an intense darkness that doesn't need to be too over the top or too brash to be completely successful. Really good Victim of the Crime. I've always liked Victim of the Crime. I never had to come around to it and like get used to it. So anytime they drop a Victim, I'm a fan. That goes into an Eyes of the World. Vince's keys just don't work. It gives it a weird little vibe. During the first solo section, Jerry takes a solo, and then before he sings, he's like, hey, Vince, why don't you take a solo? Vince takes a solo. Not the most over the top, not the most over aggressive eyes, but the energy is good. The flow is good. The sort of positivity coming out of the victim of the crime into something that's a little more free flowing and hippie and Grateful Dead dancing is good. After we get some really nice prolonged jamming after the final lyrics for a couple minutes that, you know, some good energy. They're not letting the energy die. They're riding the energy and not rushing into the next song. Kind of falls apart at one point right before we segue into an estimated. We don't get an estimated eyes. We get an eyes of the prophet. And this is a great performance. By 90, the band knew how to deliver this as a big second set, like set piece. Like this is Bob's set piece. And the performances are huge. The might and glory gonna be my name just feels like, yeah, like you want to see him on a mountaintop shouting that out to the Pacific Ocean. Really good, really nice jam at the end. Jerry and Phil kind of leading the charge, doing your typical sort of estimated prophet exploring that's pretty like not too aggressive, but very like, you know, a lot of energy into this sort of low key burn. Really good. That again starts to fall apart right when they're like, okay, we're done. We're going to head into another song. Kind of breaks up part, but somebody's keeping the jamming going at every point in time. And then we go into an Uncle John's band. Bruce is on the accordion, gets a pretty lengthy accordion solo in that middle verse, between verse 2 and 3. This is where Jerry forgets the lyrics. And listening to it, there's like a weird, awkward moment where like you can hear the crowd reacting. And my memory of it was Jerry like steps back and Bob has to walk over, or I think they meet in the middle and they like Bob's like, hey, this is what we're singing next. And it was like a funny moment. Like Jerry was smiling about it, like, hey, I have no idea what I'm singing. And I think Bob had to walk over and whisper it to him. And then they continue. The middle jam's pretty good. It has a pretty solid end jam. Jerry's guitar playing is dark in that middle jam. He's bringing that dark energy. We get a really nice short Annie jam. Then we get a drums that is fantastic. We stay with some pretty bare bones, like acoustic drumming for like the first half. And then we just completely shift to some weird electronic noises for the second half, but they're playful. We get some like frog noises, the French. It's just really almost like a techno Jungle Cruise type vibe for the second half that's super fantastic. And then space starts and space is dark. It's mysterious. I've been listening to a lot of King Crimson projects lately, like projects 1, 2, 3, and 4 from like, what was that, late 90s, early 2000s. This kind of sounds like one of those projects like jams. You know, a lot of like MIDI percussion and MIDI sounds and these weird MIDI runs and really, really good space. Like probably one of the best drum space I've heard in a long time. Absolutely fantastic. Phil and Jerry almost simultaneously jump into like the other one energy, and we get some early things get darker. We start going in that direction. The momentum's starting to build up. Phil drops an awesome bass drop, and then we're still just continue the energy. So like we're building the energy. Phil drops his bomb. We continue that energy. We get the first verse, pretty short jam between verse 1 and 2. Then we get a second verse. As soon as the second verse is done, we get an immediate cool down, segue into a really good wharf rat. Then we get a Sugar Mag knocking on heaven's door to close out the show. From a personal experience, having been there, it was one of my favorite shows of the tour, just the overall experience. As far as musical highlights, I think in the middle of that first set, it really is that Maggie Althea Cassidy Witcher Peak. The second set, I think it's The Victim. And I think The Eyes is solid, but not one of those like you have to hear. Estimated is solid. Uncle John Band has its flaws, but it's always good to hear Uncle John's Band. I just think it's a solid show, but nothing too mind-blowing. But I do think the more victims we have released, the better, because every victim always seems like they're still trying to figure out victim towards the very end. So I like that. And I do think the drums in space, absolutely fantastic. So a really, really solid show, some interesting moments, some bad keyboard choices, but it's interesting. We get a Bruce Hornsby Stanner on the Mountain. We get a rare Maggie's Farm. So a show that's almost worth having just because of sort of the novelties of it, or sort of the rarity of many of the performances. But I can't say it's a 90s show that you must hear, though it is probably one of the better Europe shows, to be honest. But then we get the filler. Absolutely, really good, kind of amazing filler. The first group of songs we get, I think it's on the end of disc 2. We get the end of set 1. We get a Let It Grow with an amazing jam at the end of it. The Let It Grow is kind of just that middle jam, and Let It Grow kind of starts a little sloppy once they jump into it, but once they start going, the energy is pretty aggressive. It's pretty intense. It's kind of long, it's kind of scrappy in that middle solo, but it's got really good energy. It does kind of feel like they're still trying to figure things out with Hornsby there for some reason. But anyways, it's weird energy, or maybe they're just exhausted after traveling around Europe. But so there's like a lack of cohesiveness to the jam, but everybody's in a good mood and they're pushing. And so the energy is good. We got a closing jam that's absolutely amazing. And then at one point, it's almost like, okay, we're going to go into the next song, and Bruce just goes off on piano. Not like he's freaking out going off, but he just keeps playing and playing. And we enter this like standalone pocket jam that's an absolutely amazing Bruce Hornsby led jam. And this thing goes on for a while. It is super tasty. At no point does anybody else in the band really try to overtake Bruce or like rob the attention from him, but they're just there supporting him. And it's just one of the neatest moments and probably the entire tour, something they needed to do more of, especially with Hornsby. I drove out to Cleveland to see the first 2 shows, and I remember the first show being one of those where everybody was like, careful, and Hornsby played in those first 2 shows, the post-Midland years. And then the second show was where they finally had these little pocket jams. We're like, all right, let Hornsby do his thing, and you guys just follow him. Excellent addition at times like this. And then we close out the first set with the Valley Road, which is this upbeat piano-led, almost doobie style rock. They try to like jam at the end. They only played this, I think they played this, I forgot how many times they played this. They didn't play this that many times also, a number of times. They played this 6 times, I think. I think I saw 4 of the 6. They played it twice in Europe, and then they played a Denver show. They played it in Denver in December. I arrived back in the States at like the 9th, got in somebody's car the 11th, and drove to Denver for those shows. And then they played it at the end of the year show. So they played Valley Road 6 times. I saw 4 of them, crazy enough. And then on the end of the last disc, they have 4 more songs as filler. The first 4 songs of set 2 opens up with a Picasso Moon. That it's a really nice, healthy jam at the end of Picasso Moon. They didn't always healthily jam that out. This is a good jam. Then they play A Foolish Heart, which this to me is one of those songs I kind of wish there was a box set of every single Foolish Heart, because it feels like they never quite figured out the intro. Like they never quite figured out how to gel around those opening chords and like deliver that in a way that was confident. But once they find that groove and once they get into the song proper, the bounce of Foolish Heart is so amazing. And this might be one of those performances where they nail everything. That middle jam is perfect. Jerry just keeps going up and putting more energy in it. And when they get to that didn't part, they nail it. They drop into the closing verses perfectly. And the momentum from the solo just kind of continues through those closing verses. So when they get to the end and there's that ending jam, it's just like one long burst of energy from like the solo all the way through the end of the song. Absolutely fantastic. Probably one of the best Foolish Hearts that are out there, and a song that I think is an enigma. I think it's an absolutely amazing song that they just never, always seem to like struggle with it for some weird reason. But this might be one of the best performances of that. Then they go into Looks Like Rain. My only complaint is I wish Bob had more things to choose from in here, because I think the jamming energy was so incredibly strong that had we got a playing in the band, or he dropped, I don't know what else, just thought outside the box and dropped something else here. We just needed more jamming energy. But this is a good Looks Like Rain. Jerry's middle solo is super intense. The ending vibe is good. They're taking the energy from the Picasso Heart and really riding that well. And then we go into a Terrapin. A beautiful, elegant, classy Terrapin. That jam before we go into the darkness, before the sense the end is never told. The jam before that, the solo before that is just sweet and beautiful and elegant and goes so well with the lady with the fan vibe. Then we build into the inspiration drop. That whole thing is perfect. We get the ending, that whole end build jam. After we run through that, we get a really nice chill down jam where we're still doing the do 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 do, doing that, but on a calm level as people start branching out and Bruce starts doing some interesting little runs and everybody starts going off to this nice little gentle jam as we go off into drums. The bonus material on here, I think, is some of the best chosen bonus material. Makes you wonder why the whole 30th show isn't on here and they just put the bonus material from the 28th, but I haven't gone back and listened to it, though. I remember the 30th show being one of my favorite shows of the tour, and this obviously is why. So a really, really solid release. I'm glad we have more Europe stuff. Of the shows, I remember Essen being a super strong show. The Berlin shows were both interesting. Both Paris shows were interesting. Hamburg had weird energy. The last London show was on good. The Halloween show was fun. But yeah, I'm glad we have more Europe stuff. So anyways, if I were to rank these among all the others, first, if I were to rank this, because this is a Welnick era show, I have it there at 5 out of 8. I'm not letting the bonus material have too much weight in these rankings because it really is a small percentage. The actual 28th show itself, I think, like I said, it's the songs that are played. It's not necessarily the performances, though none of them are bad. It's a really solid release. Among the 90s, which is going to be a much higher bar, right now I've only done 6 other ones, so I have it also pretty much at the same place, right below the middle. I have it ranked at number 4 out of the 7 that I've done. So yeah, that's where it would be. Oh, and among all the other Dave's picks, which I haven't yet ranked where it would fall among all the others Dave's picks, I would probably have it somewhere also right around the middle. I will drop that when I do my next Dave's picks. I completely forgot about that list, but it's going to be somewhere around the middle, I would say, just because, well, you can see where the other Dave's picks are on there. So anyways, but yeah, all right, I forgot that, but that's my bad. It's going to be somewhere in the middle. Yeah, that's it, somewhere in the middle. All right, that's all I got. Thanks for watching. Let me know your thoughts on this list, and if you get it, if you already have it, if you go listen to it, all that kind of stuff. Subscribe, like, share, comment, and go listen to the Grateful Dead because it makes everybody's days brighter. And that's all I got. Peace. Talk to you later.